Hi guys, amazingly this is our 34th episode of our introducing series. We work incredibly hard to get hold of as many weird and wonderful and interesting species as possible, and when we first started out on this journey, a lot of people would be forgiven for thinking that there was only maybe 2 or 3 species of lizard and 2 or 3 species of snake that are appropriate for the beginner, and nothing could be further from the truth. And today's lizard is, it's a real shame it never quite caught on as much as its cousin, and they're incredibly rare in the wild, and they're endangered, but they are bred in captivity with a fair amount of regularity, but unfortunately they can be overlooked. So today we're going to discuss Roux giant gecko. Now it does have other common names, but we're going to stick with Roux giant gecko out of respect for the gentleman who found it, Roux. So the species was first described by Roux in 1913. Roux was a Swiss herpetologist born in Geneva in 1876. Roux completed his doctorate at the University of Geneva. After initial posts in Berlin, doing research unrelated to herpetology, he became the curator of the Swiss Museum of Natural History in Basel. His predecessor at Basel, Fritz Müller, provided herpetological specimens for analysis, where they would be sorted and classified. Cool adventures ensued, firstly with trips to Roux and Key Island in Indonesia in 1907 and 1908. So let's just spare a thought for a moment about that. Virgin rainforest, Roux Island, turn of the 20th century, completely unspoilt by man, loads of indigenous tribes, just unspoilt rainforests, the plethora of animals that would have still been there because man hadn't cocked the place up. It's just an amazing thought what these guys and ladies will have seen when they've gone on these trips. Just absolutely phenomenal. No language, having to break down those barriers. These dudes were the Indiana Jones of taxonomy. It was ace. So once they came back from Roux and Key Island, they had to obviously work through the analysis of the species collected and the specimens. Where are you two going? Come back hither. You happy there? Don't be disappearing down my back, monster. No, you're not hopping off. So after that, a follow-up trip then happened in 1911 to 1912, where him and a gentleman called Fritz Saracen visited New Caledonia and the neighbouring Loyalty Islands. So they produced a very important work based on this trip, and it was called Nova Caledonia, Researching New Caledonia and on the Loyalty Islands, except the name was German. I had to translate it. I'm fed up with trying to butcher other people's languages. So yes, those listening closely will have spotted Fritz Saracen's name in the scientific name of the species, Sarasinorum. So you would be forgiven for thinking that this was his gecko. In fact, before making this video, I only really knew about Saracen and the reference to Saracen. I knew nothing about Roux, or the fact that the common name for the species is Roux giant gecko, not Saracen's giant gecko. Over time, the adoption of the honoured name in the biominal took hold over the common name. So it's a shame that Roux's contribution to the species, for the most part, has been lost or forgotten within the hobby. So we try and put that right. Worry not though. Roux was later honoured in the scientific name Lipinia roui, described by Heidegger in 1934, and this was 5 years before. Where are you going? Thank you, monster. I feel you tickling down by my armpit, missus. This was in 1934, 5 years before Roux's death, so at least he got to see his name honoured in the scientific name. Originally, Sarasinorum were grouped in with the genus Rhacodactylus, along with the other New Caledonian giant geckos, and these included the true giants, Rhacodactylus leachianus, and there's 3 recognised subspecies, as well as the rough-snouted giant geckos, so Rhacodactylus trachyrhynchus and Rhacodactylus trachycephalus, and then the lovely little gargoyle gecko, Rhacodactylus auriculatus. The genus Rhacodactylus was first described by Leopold Fitzinger in 1843. The genus Correlophus was first described by Alphonse Guicheneau, a French zoologist, in 1866, and this genus was created for the newly described New Caledonian crested gecko, the cresty that we all keep in the hobby today, whose Latin name is Correlophus ciliatus. The crested gecko was later grouped into Rhacodactylus with the rest of the species in the mid-1990s. Both the crested gecko and Roux gecko were returned to Correlophus in 2012 by Messrs. Bauer, Whitaker, Sadlier and Jackman. The genus had been redundant when the crested geckos moved away, but was resurrected when DNA evidence found by the team in 2012 that it differentiated them from the rest of the Rhacodactylus clan. The type locality for Roux giant gecko is Prony in the South Province. Where are you two going? Come hither. That's it, good lad. Hey? Is Prony in South Province of Grand Terra, New Caledonia. The only weather data I can find is for an area called Noumea, South Province, which is 35 kilometres north along the coast. So the weather data for this region, the hot season is from December to February, with a daytime high of 29 Celsius, nighttime lows of 22 to 24 Celsius. The cool season is from June to September, with daytime highs of 23 to 24 Celsius and nighttime lows of 18 to 19 Celsius. The wet season is from January to April, with rainfall varying between 92 and 135 millimetres of rain per month. The dry season is September to November, with 38 to 45 millimetres of rain per month. Excuse me. Roux giant gecko is predominantly nocturnal and differs from the other Correlophus and Rhacodactylus species by being less exclusively arboreal and will readily burrow into substrate, so it's quite common to find them underground, or if they're buried underneath the leaf litter within the vivarium. The care and the maintenance of the Roux giant gecko is very similar to crested geckos, so we can draw some parallels there. So at which point, if we were growing on babies, potentially we would grow them on in the mini tall, and they would then subsequently move up into the small tall, so 18 by 18 by 24. If you were going to keep a pair or more, this tank would then need to be larger. Heat, generally, I've always provided with a heat pad strapped to the side with a thermostat to regulate a surface to 28 degrees Celsius that the animals can then migrate away from. There is a movement towards providing ultraviolet light and full spectrum lighting for all lizards, and this would take the form of such as the Arcadia shade dweller, which is a T5 tube that gives a UV index of 1 at a foot distance away. This would be on 12 hours a day. You can offer them then circadian rhythms. They are frugivores and insectivores, and they will take the complete diets on the market, including Smith's, Pangea and Rapashi, and the various flavours thereof, as well as live insects. They are fantastically tame and interesting geckos, and you can see the parallels to the crested gecko. They probably have an extra centimetre or so on length, but they are smooth. There is none of the crest round the head or down the neck or down the dorsum. They fire up and fire down as appropriate for, with their temperatures, and sometimes they're golden and then other times they drop to being almost tan. Also, we're going to be looking at a lifespan of between 25 to 30 years. These are a long-lived gecko, and they're not quite as prolific as the crested geckos. They won't lay the eggs as regularly, but they will still produce them. Incubation can take place either in the bottom of the enclosure in a separate egg container, where it will take between 90 and 100 days, or they can be incubated in a such as a polystyrene incubator at between 27 and 28 degrees Celsius for a period of around 60 days. A lot of work needs to be done with them. They've actually only been collected from 6 areas in Grand Terra, New Caledonia in the South Province, and at which point we almost have a duty to work with them. Correlophus sarasinorum are a fantastic gecko. They are just so full of beans, full of personality, totally gentle, not an aggressive bone in their body, and would make a fabulous opportunity to be able to introduce more of these species, more specimens to the hobby, which is what the hobby deserves. After all, a lot of the Rhacodactylus and Correlophus were feared extinct until rediscovered in 1994, and at which point we've now got crested geckos to be within the top 5 easily of species of lizard kept in captivity. And that really is through the efforts of initially zoological institutions, but for the main part, private keepers. And the same story goes for the rest of the Roux and the Correlophus, including these awesome Roux giant gecko. You can also search for them as Saracens giant gecko, where you will find results for both. Research, as always, is super important, and make sure that we stay responsible when we're buying a new pet. These geckos obviously lend themselves to the option of bioactive for the people that are interested in doing that. It holds no law for me, but I know that there's a big movement out there for people, and these geckos will get along reasonably well, although they may be a little bit destructive, bouncing around on the around the tank and uprooting the plants that you've so dedicatingly planted in. So these two are a proven breeding pair, and I was under strict instructions if I did the video that I had to introduce them by name from the previous owners. So this is Broccoli and this is Bean. I think I've got that the right way around. Broccoli being the boy and Bean being the girl. So if we look at Bean, we can see that there's next to no hempenal bulges, but more of a heart shape. And if you look at our lizard sexing video we did in the Snakes and Adders Reptile Advice series, this follows suit with what we were drawing, with the leg webbing and the heart-shaped lump post-anally. If I then show you Broccoli, come on my darling, you can see the hempenal bulges are really quite large. Now, as babies, the same with crested geckos, we may have to wait for the sexual dimorphism to become apparent, but once they drop, there is no mistaking a boy for a girl. They're ace. Honestly, they're ace. You could do so much. Yes, getting giddy now, aren't you? You could do so much worse than keep these as pets. Do your research. Roux giant gecko, Saracens giant gecko, or the Surus gecko, Correlophus sarasinorum. We'll see you again soon, guys. All the best from Chaz and Paul at Snakes and Adders. Peace.